Okay, so we're into the 1950s and we're now going to talk about the nuclear arms race. So this begins technically in 1949 with the Soviet invention of their own nuclear bomb. Obviously, America got there in 1945. But it starts the panic of America funding huge amounts more research into nuclear technology, trying to develop bigger weapons, better ways of delivering weapons as well, because at this time, the only way to drop a nuclear bomb, just like in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, was to fly a plane over the target and drop it out like an ordinary conventional warhead, and it would explode a few hundred feet above the town, city, whatever the target was. So during the 1950s, there was a huge belief that the way to deal with the Cold War was to get ahead, was to get the new weapons, better weapons, bigger weapons. And by 1952, this funding's paid off. The Americans have developed the H-bomb, the hydrogen bomb. So the A-bomb is short for atomic bomb, the original nuclear bomb. The H-bomb is the hydrogen bomb. A similar idea in terms of the science, but just a little bit of a different type of technology. It requires a small atomic bomb to actually set it off. So it just shows the scale of it. And approximately some of these H-bombs are 1,000 times bigger, the explosion of an ordinary atomic bomb. An atomic bomb wiped out a whole city at a time. So you can see these are huge weapons, hugely powerful weapons we're talking about. By 1953, the Soviets have caught up very quickly and they've developed their own H-bomb. So you can see the race that's going on. They're both wanting to get ahead, both wanting to push further and further, either to catch up or to get an advantage, or to not be disadvantaged. This continues. It kind of links with the space race, because the same technology we'll talk about when I talk about the space race on a separate video provides in 1958 a new way of delivering these bombs, new and scary way for both sides. It's called the ICBM, the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. And essentially these are missiles that fly into the upper atmosphere, almost into space essentially, so that they can fly very, very fast, several times the speed of sound, almost undetectable until the last few seconds. So very difficult for them to develop any sort of defense. Being able to shoot them down is just beyond their capabilities at that time. But they can go between continents. They can go thousands of miles and drop a bomb on the target. And this makes it very worrying. Both of them developed them really in the late 1950s, and this is a new dimension to the nuclear arms race, because it's not just about bigger weapons anymore, it's about delivering the weapons, and positioning them becomes an issue as well. They're trying to position them in places around the world that they'll be able to strike the enemy if they get struck, and at least these ideas such as mutually assured destruction. This is why there is no war between the Soviet Union and the United States during the Cold War, because both sides are convinced that if they are the ones that start it, then the other side will fire their nuclear weapons back very quickly. Both sides will have all of their major cities destroyed. And in fact, how can you win a war when all of your major cities and millions upon millions, if not hundreds of millions, are dead as a result? So the only way to win nuclear war in their eyes is to strike first, and strike so hard that the enemy can't strike back at you. But as these missiles were kept in kind of underground bunkers and missile silos, which is essentially a bunker for a missile to stay in until it's needed, it's very difficult to find all the enemy's missiles and destroy them on the ground before they're launched. It's a big risk to take to try and destroy an entire country before they can fire theirs back. And in fact, neither side was willing to risk it, because they know this whole idea of mad mutually assured destruction means that it's mutual or shared, that it's definite or assured that both sides will be destroyed. That's the destruction part. So mutually assured destruction keeps this from becoming an actual war and stays a Cold War because of this nuclear arms race. Now, what they do, though, is they use these as kind of tools to kind of push each other as far as they can go. And this is called brinkmanship. They push each other to the brink, as we'll see later with the Cuban Missile Crisis. That was the brink, really, of nuclear war, pushing each other to the brink to see how much they can get from the other side, how much they can squeeze out of them, in the hope that they can get more and more and more gains, more territory or concessions or whatever it is, various incidents. And it's the nuclear weapons that allow them to do this. But remember, all the time they're fighting in terms of like the Korean War, for example, or the Vietnam War. They're using these proxy wars to kind of indirectly fight each other, but they're using conventional weapons. They're using guns, they're using normal bombs, they're using helicopters, planes, tanks, all these other things, because they're unwilling to use the more technologically advanced bombs, because that will get it all out of hand, and they know that. So there's kind of an element of kind of being sensible about this. Neither side risked this all-out nuclear war. Now, the nuclear arms race continues into the 1960s, but after the Cuban Missile Crisis, as we'll see, it starts to get a little bit less important. And in fact, the end of our topic is the SALT I agreement. The Strategic Arms Limitation Talks was a deal done to limit the number of nuclear weapons and the other types of technology that they would have. So it kind of is definitely at an end by that stage.